So, welcome to this month's workshop offered by the University of Kentucky and the Office of Work Life. As always, we are offering wonderful opportunities to our working parents here at the university. And today we are going to be talking about new teen drivers and safety as it relates to new teen drivers. And our guest speaker today is Sherry Hannon with Safe Kids Fayette County, and she will just be leading this workshop discussion today. Thank you so much, Sherry, for being with us today.
Thank you for the invite and thank you all for showing up. I'm glad that there is some interest in this topic because it is very important. I am a registered nurse at the Kentucky Children's Hospital, but my job is to do an injury prevention program called Safe Kids, which is external facing from the hospital. And buckle up is just one of the injury risk areas that we cover. It happens to be Teen Driver Safety Week that happens every October. So this is a very fitting and appropriate subject to discuss. And if you all just don't care, just so that I know who I'm talking to put in the chat, if you have young teen drivers or, getting ready to have teenagers turning 16 and will be thinking about getting their permits, and you'll be able, thinking about, this journey that you're getting ready to start. Okay. Getting ready to take a driver's test. Yes. Yes. Okay. Well, hopefully you're going to find this, informative, and maybe just, if nothing else, give you pause to think about some of the things that we'll discuss today. Because I wish, even as a coordinator of a childhood injury prevention program, I wish I had done some things differently when I had teen drivers. So we're going to get started so that you can um, uh, learn some of this new information and become aware and hopefully find it very useful. So this is part of an Impact Teen Driver program that I have been trained to share with either teen drivers themselves, which is a little bit of a different presentation. If that's something that you're interested in finding out when we present those, you can contact me. But this is the parent portion. So this is what we're going to share today. Um, and I think the first thing that we have to think about when we are beginning this process of teaching kids to drive is knowing that as soon as they turn around in their forward facing car seat, they're watching, they're learning how to drive. They're learning your behavior. If you are an assertive driver, if you're a fussy driver that makes a lot of comments when they get cut off, or someone not immediately pulling off when the light turns green. They are learning to be that kind of driver because that you are their role model. And so if you're drinking and driving, if you're on your phone and driving, all of those are learned behaviors that kids as young as 2 years old start to pick up on. So just keep that in mind as you know that your children are watching and observing you as a driver. Do you run through yellow lights? Are you speeding excessively in neighborhoods? Are you a speed limit follower? So that is something I think that we want to make sure that you think about as a parent driver, the example that you set. But this is an important topic because we know that teen drivers are very vulnerable. Each year we lose nearly 4,000 young lives due to a preventable car crash. So that means something could have been done that maybe those teens shouldn't have been involved in a crash, or maybe not as severe a crash. 50% of the teen driving fatalities are the passengers being driven by the teen driver. So it's not necessarily the teen driver, but it's all of the passengers that may be in that vehicle. And because of that inexperience of the teen driver, more prone to being in a crash, the passengers are the ones that typically have a high fatality rate. Again, parents are that number one influencer of teen attitudes and behaviors when they become drivers. So your choices can and do influence your teen safety behind the wheel. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about today. So we look at some other teen driving statistics. 40% since the inception of the graduated driver licensing laws, and we're going to go over those, teen fatalities and serious injuries have been reduced by up to 40%. We know that having some of those extra steps, some of those um, extended time for kids to learn how to drive, to be evaluated, and to be taught helps them to be better drivers and have better outcomes in crashes. Teens are 4 times more likely to be involved in a fatal crash if they choose to drive at night. And I think that that just makes sense. Visibility isn't as well, especially if you're in areas that a teen is maybe not as familiar with. So all of those things related to that, the darkness and the nighttime driving makes it more dangerous. 75% of fatal teen crashes have nothing to do with drugs or alcohol. A lot of times we just automatically make that association that if there's a teen crash, there must have been alcohol or drugs involved. Most of the time, that is not the case. And when they do a lot of the accident reconstruction and look at the details of a crash, we are not finding that a lot of these accidents are involved with any type of alcohol or drugs. And then teen passenger, if you have more than three, it quadruples a teen's risk of being involved in a fatal crash. So thinking about all of the passengers in a vehicle that could cause distractions to that novice teen driver is hugely impactful. And if you just think about this experience of being a new driver behind the wheel of a car, it really is probably makes teens at the greatest risk that they will ever face in their entire life is being a new driver behind the wheel of a car. So there is a lot of risk involved during this period of learning and gaining that experience. It's required in order to, get those skills, but it is a very dangerous time. So as parents, we just want to be very thoughtful and purposeful in the way that we let teens gain that experience. So we're going to watch this video here.
I love my kids. And let's be real, we parents know raising teens is really hard. I'm constantly reminding my kids how to drive and ride safely. But do they listen? Of course not. Classic teenagers. I tell them, don't eat while driving. I say, no talking on the phone. Mom. You got to pay attention to what you're doing. I just don't know where they get it from. As you just saw, it's so easy to fall into the habit of do as I say, not as I do. It didn't work for us when we were kids. So why do we think it will work on our teens? I'm a parent, you're a parent, and it can be overwhelming thinking about all the different things that go into having our children learn to drive. Did you know that car crashes are the #1 killer of teens in America, particularly those caused by reckless and distracted driving? Driving too fast and anything that takes your hands off the wheel, eyes off the road, or mind off the drive, that's reckless or distracted driving. And guess what? 75% of those situations happen to teens who aren't under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Imagine your child losing their life or taking someone else's. How would your life change? It happens every day, and it can happen to you. As a parent myself, I know how devastating it would be. But the good news is, it doesn't matter what we did yesterday. It's what we start doing today. 100% of crashes due to reckless and distracted driving are preventable. One of the ways states try to help parents prevent these horrible crashes is through graduated driver licensing, GDL. These regulations cover the different stages of obtaining a driver's license. It's about slowly stepping up the freedom behind the wheel to go along with gaining the unique experience to be responsible. They reduce the two biggest risk factors for new teen drivers: Nighttime driving, where it's harder to see and react, and where there are more impaired and drowsy drivers, and having multiple teen passengers in the vehicle, a recipe for distraction. Our teens are 4 times more likely to be involved in a fatal crash at night, and the same is true if there are 3 or more teens in the car. I'm sure some of you may have heard the term UPL, but how many of us know the letter of the law in our states? When is the legal curfew? How many passengers can they have? And at what age? These laws have reduced serious injuries and fatalities for teen drivers by up to 40%. That means it's worth our time to learn and follow your local graduated driver licensing law. And remember, as parents, we can always choose to place more restrictions than the bare minimum stated in the law. Our kids' lives and the lives of others depend on it. I want to introduce you to a very special girl in your life.
She didn't just walk in and light up a room. She lit up the world. She was always smiling. And she had the biggest dimples ever. And it didn't matter if you were, 3 years old or the janitor at her high school. She was friends with everyone. Yeah, me and Ryan were close because I would take her to school. I would take her to school on Wednesday. They'd go to cheer practice. We go to the mall every time I got paid. I like to with her. My girls, they wanted to hang out with each other over time. Yeah, I think she looked up to me. Riley was the driver, and Abby, her friend, was in the passenger, and then Ryan was sitting in the back seat. They get in the car and they start heading home. And Riley's. Are you all having trouble hearing?
It appears like some kind of echo. I don't know if I'm hearing it through your screen.
Well, just so that we're not making it so that it's a time waster. I don't want to mess with it too much just because I'm afraid I'll end up making it worse instead of better. You'll have this copy of this PowerPoint, so you can go on and listen. You can go to the Impact Team Driver website and you can look at some of these videos. But this was just going to be a story of a young driver who lost their lives and was riding with an inexperienced team driver. And so I love we'll go on, and I apologize for that. I didn't know that we were going to have issues. I think there's one more video as well. We need to talk to our teens about distracted driving. And all of those can come in different forms. And there are typically 4 different distracted driving forms that we know of, and that's visual, where you're taking your eyes off the road, where maybe you're looking at the landscape, maybe you're turning around and talking to a passenger in the car, maybe looking down at your phone or changing the radio station. But anytime you take your eyes off the road, that is a visual distraction. And one of the things that I learned early on when starting to do this program and talking to team drivers is that if you're not paying attention, if you're not observing your surroundings, that makes you vulnerable. And you don't want to be a vulnerable driver. You want to be able to see, is someone passing and going to be in your lane? Is there, construction up ahead? Something that is, in the road that you need to try to miss. If you're not observing and paying attention to what is ahead, you may put yourself at risk. If you see something getting ready to happen, you can try to avoid it. You can, get over in the emergency lane. You can stop, slow down, any of those types of smart driving maneuvers. If you see something that is getting ready to happen, instead of just not paying attention and then, being able to react too late and then a crash occurring. So, you want to make sure that you have these conversations about how important it is to pay attention and be looking and observing, looking forward, looking in your mirrors to see what's going on. The manual distraction, excuse me, anytime you take your hands off the wheel. So whether that's your, digging in your McDonald's drive-through bag to, eat something before, practice, or, again, on your phone, changing the radio station. Anytime that we are taking our hands off the wheel, that is a manual distraction. We are not doing the task that we are meant to be doing solely when we're operating the vehicle of a car. So manual is, important too. Cognitively, I think we've all, as adults, experienced driving where we're daydreaming or just, not even paying attention to our surroundings. And we get to some place and we're like, I don't even remember, passing the Walmart. I don't remember, how I got this far because I really wasn't paying attention. So we have a little bit of muscle memory where we may go the same routes day after day, going to and from work. But, if we're not cognitively aware of what's going on, if we're not paying attention and thinking about our speed and about what's, on the road, then, we may be distracted just because our mind is not on the task of driving. So, not, having kids distracted, us not distracting them by sending messages, telling them, text me when you get there, not you texting them, have you made it yet? But, giving them ample time to arrive at their destination and then, start a conversation, because we don't want to be that distraction when our teens are driving. Auditory, making sure that radio is not too loud, making sure that they can hear, emergency vehicles, making sure that, they're not distracted with the, conversations and a lot of rowdiness maybe that's going on in a car if there's multiple people. So all of those things, sometimes one of them alone is bad enough, but sometimes when we have several of these distractions, and sometimes when we have, maybe, promptings from people in the car to drive faster or to do maybe some type of risky behavior. All of those things can make for an unsafe situation. And you want to talk to your team about that, about how important it is to be a responsible driver, the people's lives at risk that are in their car and on the road with them. So talk about each of these different forms of distractions, and talk to your teen about maybe what they've done in the past, eat in the car, listen to the radio in the car, but how some of those behaviors may have to be changed or just completely adapted to something different as a new driver. So you look at the risk with passengers, and we've talked about that a couple times already. No passengers is best, especially for a teen driver, because you don't have anybody to talk to. You can be more focused on the road. So, maybe limiting that to 0 when they first get their intermediate driver's licensing. And then, as you feel more comfortable, as you're able to trust your teen driver that they're following the rules and they are able to speak up to tell passengers they need to, quieten down or turn the radio down, then maybe, at certain points they can have some teen passengers in the car. We're going to talk about the graduated driver licensing law here in a second, and when that's actually allowed by law. And you want to follow those. You may hear of other teen driver parents who aren't following those laws and maybe feel like maybe I'm being too strict, but those laws are there for a reason, to protect the teen drivers. And so, following that to the letter of the law is really important to make sure that your teen drivers, one, not putting themselves at risk, but others at risk as well. So the more passengers, the more at risk they are for being distracted, and there being a crash that would occur. So we have a little wheel that we do when we do programs with teens, and it's called the kind of the wheel of distraction. And so, we look at this wheel and, if you're texting or on the phone or not distracted, maybe reading, and then you put that with, another type of distraction, whether that's, listening to the radio or, more passengers. Each layer becomes more dangerous, makes them more at risk for having a crash. So we do this little activity with teen drivers just to let them see that, it compounds nighttime driving, multiple passengers, distracted, whether that's, even just eating when you're by yourself, or whether that's, the whole group of your friends in the car with you and you're listening to the radio and you're singing and dancing and you think you're having a good time, but it really is distracting to the driver of the vehicle. So we do this to let them see that all of these distractions multiplied and compounded, end up making them more at risk for a crash. And so when is driving more dangerous? Of course, we've already heard that that's nighttime driving, and you may agree with that as well. It's just harder to see at night. Some areas are more well lit than others. When you're driving in unfamiliar territory, it's very hard to kind of navigate where you're going and in streets and making turns, and then being able to just follow the road layout. Other things might include, being drowsy, teens that are drowsy driving because maybe they got off work late, or even going to school drowsy because they stayed up late studying for a test. You can always offer to drive your teen. They don't, even though they have their permit or their license, they don't have to drive. So if driving drowsy is an issue, if they're taking medicine that makes them drowsy, those might be, concerns of yours, and you would be, willing to take your child to school when those things happen. But again, just, thinking about, times that would be proven to be more dangerous. And then I'll just add one more thing to when is driving more dangerous. That's not related to nighttime, but it's related to maybe weather. Whether there's bad storms and heavy rain, or ice and snow on the roadway. Those would probably be times that you don't want a new teen driver to be driving on their own. Having them stay at home, having you take them to school or to practice. But thinking about driving with them in those conditions so that they can gain experience with you in the car, but not letting them just do it alone by themselves until you have been able to go out with them on multiple occasions when weather is happening, and see, how do they do when those things occur? Are they stressed? Are they getting too close to cars? Are they having trouble seeing? So that you can evaluate and see if those are conditions that, okay, I've seen that you can do good when it rains really hard, so I can let you go. Or, no, it's raining hard. We still need to work on that. And, I will take you to your piano lesson. So that is, another issue is thinking about weather. And then the third piece of this that I want to bring up and maybe have you think about is roads. Are there certain roads in your city or county that you want your kids to stay away from? There may be certain routes that they're very comfortable with driving from home to school or home to church that aren't, necessarily, very dangerous. But, if there are, different kinds of roadways, bypasses where, the speed limits may be higher, maybe on the interstate, and they haven't practiced that a lot. Maybe just streets that are hard to navigate, like Nicholasville Road and the stoplights that change all the lanes. Again, think about, having them stay away from certain, country roads that are, windy and are known for a lot of motor vehicle crashes. And go with them during those, peak driving times where there's a lot of traffic, where the speed limit may be increased, see how they're able to control the car, how they're able to navigate traffic, and just keep practicing that until their skills have improved to the point that you're comfortable letting them maybe drive on a certain road, and even if it's a road that is part of your normal route, but you consider it still quite dangerous. I lived in Winchester for many years, and there was a Colby Road, Todd's Road, which is kind of like a shortcut to a certain end of Fayette County. And I would want my kids not to go on that road because there was no forgiveness, because it was just a 2-lane kind of country road that had a lot of curves and mature trees and fences. So I would rather them have taken like Winchester Road or US 60. So if they knew that they were getting to drive, that was the route that they needed to take. And so having some of those conversations, spending that extra time with your team driver so that, they are learning skills, but under your direct supervision, and that you're able to decide when you can let them, move on to more, high risk driving. So here's the visibility. You can kind of see where it's hard to see, what's on the side of the road, if anything were to jump out. And just some of those low light conditions, are hard. Look over here. And of course, speeding is a big thing, with people being impaired. Those things tend to occur more at night than, during the middle of the day, although I know that those kind of things do happen. But, drinking and driving typically happen more at nighttime hours. We have our drowsy driver. And it's just very difficult to stay awake when you're tired. And then you kind of see either people, animals that may, be in places that you're not expecting them. Pretty advancing here. Okay, sorry about that. So we've talked about the graduated driver licensing laws. Every state has them. They differ a little bit, but they really were enacted not to, make it a hardship or to, police young drivers, but it was because of the need to improve safety as it relates to them, their driving experience. So most of us that are, probably old enough to have some children that are approaching learning to drive, we may have, got our license just maybe 6 weeks after getting our permit. So a lot has changed. But when they looked at different accidents that were related to teen drivers and carloads of kids that were killed, the legislators knew that they needed to enact some sort of laws that would help protect this vulnerable age group. So it's kind of in a 3-part series of getting your learner's permit. Then we have a phase for intermediate licensing, and then becoming a full licensed driver. We're going to talk about each of those. So this is for Kentucky. So this would apply if you live here. You can go to your county clerk's office when you're 16 and take your written driver's test. And there is also an eye test that you take. And you have your permit for at least 6 months, so 180 days. So they will tell you when you pass your written permit test, the first day that you're eligible to come take the road test to get your intermediate. And there is a log sheet that you can keep track of, that you can put down, your hours of driving practice. So, if on Sunday you drove for 2 hours and on Wednesday you drove for 2 hours, you can keep a log of that. Sometimes, I know teams taking the road test will bring that in for the state police officer to look at. They would really like 10 of those hours to be nighttime hours, just to at least be able to kind of dip your toes into nighttime driving. Um, but there's a log sheet that you can have, and it used to be that kids could study the driving manual, but those are all online now, and you can also take driving tests, like practice tests. So I'd encourage your team to download that Kentucky State driving manual and do some of those practice tests before they go to take their written permit test. Of course, you have to have a letter from school because you have to be enrolled in school full time in order to get your permit at 16. But when you do all of your practice driving, you have to be accompanied by a licensed driver at least 21 years old or older. So that's typically mom and dad or grandparents. But if you have if you have an 18-year-old child that has their license, they would not qualify to be that licensed driver for a team that just has their permit. So it needs to be 21 years or older. Um, they can only have one unrelated person in the car under the age of 20. And that's just because of crashes. You don't want, a car full of people with a driver that's just learning and is inexperienced. So only one unrelated person in the car. We don't legislate families because, different, things that's up for a parent to determine, but one unrelated person. So that would be, a friend or whatever. They are not permitted to drive between 12 and 6 a.m. because of, that nighttime driving, because of the incidents of drugged or drunk driving happening during those hours. If they are pulled over and cited for any kind of moving violation, like running a stop sign, not giving their turn signal, um, um, rolling through a stoplight, anything like that, they have to restart that 180-day waiting period. So, I have heard of some kids getting very close to being able to take their written test, and they were pulled over and got that moving violation, and they had to start, all over again from the very beginning. So if you don't pass your permit phase with the written test, we have a no pass, no drive law in the state of Kentucky. So you have to go through this at 16. Now, and if you become 18, then it's a different set of circumstances because you're just a little bit older. So stage 2 is the intermediate licensing phase, where the teen driver would take the road test, and typically there is a route that they would have to go on with typically a state police officer who does this kind of work. So if they pass the road test, then they get a little sticker on their permit, which makes them have their intermediate license. If they fail, they have to make another appointment and have to wait at least 7 days before they can take it again. There is a driver education training that kids are required to take. I think it's like several hours long. I know a lot of high schools offer that, but there is a website different counties about where they can go to get that, and it is a required training that they have to take sometime in their permitted or their intermediate licensing time period. And then they have their intermediate license for another 6 months or 180 days. Again, they cannot drive between the hours of 12 to 6 a.m. unless it is related to work or an emergency. And then, of course, if they're under 18, they are still limited to only having one unrelated person in the vehicle with them. So, again, that's just there so that they don't have a carload of their best friends in the car. But again, that is not related to legislating what families do. So if you have a teen driver that has their intermediate and they have two younger brothers and sisters, that does not count because they're family members. And so the unrelated is the key word there. But again, they can drive by themselves at this time. But all of the things that we have talked about earlier, the the nighttime driving. You might want to say you can drive up until 8 and then go a little bit later, up until 9, up until 10, and going with them until you see what kind of driver they are during those conditions of nighttime, weather related on certain roads, so that you are convinced and feel, quite certain that they can navigate the vehicle safely in those types of conditions. And then the last phase is after that 180 days of being an intermediate license, they can apply for their full license, which removes all of those restrictions so that they are just like you or I, and they get the horizontal license instead of the vertical ones, and they become a fully licensed, unrestricted driver. But again, take that as long as you need to. Those are guidance, but nobody knows the maturity of your team, or, their competency level, how seriously they take it, how responsible they are. So, those are decisions that you can extend those times. These are just the bare minimums that the Kentucky GDL law requires. And we're not going to do Hunter's story because I'm afraid it's just going to echo again. So, these are the top 10 tips for keeping teen drivers and passengers safe. And one is buckle up. The best line of defense in a car crash. It takes seconds. It's not a hardship to buckle your seatbelt. That should be something that is a non-negotiable. Hopefully it's something that, as children growing up riding in car seats and booster seats and seat belts, that is just ingrained, and it's just a habit now that they just know to buckle up. They know, that is the life-saving device that we have in the car. And even with airbags, they're just a secondary supplemental, system in the vehicle to protect us. But that seat belt is really what is going to protect us in a crash. So, you hear the horror stories about a child that's always buckled up, knew that they should have and then didn't. So again, having some of those tough conversations, and it might feel uncomfortable, but if there's not enough seatbelts in a vehicle, you don't ride. You either don't go, or you call and ask me to come get you and take you somewhere. That is just a non-negotiable. We have primary seatbelt law in the state of Kentucky. But that doesn't mean everybody always follows the law, and we know that. But that is something that, as a driver, the example you set, everyone in your vehicle needs to be buckled up. And if you're not, you can injure or kill other passengers in your vehicle if you are a projectile in a crash, where you can, honestly, take the lives of an innocent person because you didn't buckle up. So, making that just a non-negotiable, that everybody has to be buckled up in the car. Set the example. You are the number one influencer. Being involved, having those conversations, evaluating, reviewing, spending those extra times going out in the car, continuing to learn, continuing to let that team driver get education. And it just is, they feel more comfortable, and it gives you more peace of mind if you've gone with them and seen what kind of driver they are, what things they need to work on a little bit better. So again, taking the time of not just like, they got their intermediate or their full license and just letting them go. This is a time that really needs a lot of attention still from you, so that they have the benefit of knowing, mom and dad are listening, they're watching, they're paying attention. And still asking for permission. Can I take this person home? So who your child is transporting. And if your child is going to be a passenger, who they're getting in the car with, so that you are comfortable with them in that situation. Because you may be like, no, I don't want you to be a passenger with someone that just got their immediate driver license, last week. So, ask for permission, ask them to make that a requirement that they talk to you first before making some of those decisions. Talk about how to drive distraction free, two hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, mind on the task, ears alert. All of those things need to be happening simultaneously in order to assure, driving safely. And any one of those things that aren't happening could cause there to be a crash. Talk about how to be an aware and vocal passenger. If a driver is doing something that you feel like is unsafe, then you want to, challenge your young person to say, hey, can you drop me off up here? I'll call my mom. Or have a secret word that if your child calls you, you can be the bad person to say, I just saw you didn't clean your room. I'm coming to get you because, you're not going, out tonight. You be the bad person. I did that a lot with my kids where I was just like, you say a certain phrase to me and I'll know that I need to come and get you. And you don't have to, act like it's your fault. You can be embarrassed because you have a bad, a mean mom. But, have some of those plans in place. So if your child ever feels unsafe with someone's driving or they don't want to get in the car with them, they know that they can always count on you with no questions asked, no repercussions, and they will be safe. Know the driver, choose safety over convenience. Again, sometimes we wait for that milestone and they can take themselves to school. They can drive themselves to practice. They can drive themselves home. And, we think of that, finally, I don't have to be the taxi. But think about how dangerous this particular time is for teens. And if they still need us and we want to be able to give them good guidance and be there to support them. And if there are situations that puts them as drivers or passengers in harm's way, we, still as lovingly as we did when they were kids in car seats, show up and know that, if we say no because we don't want you to go with ride with someone or to take someone in your car, it's just a precaution. Always, always, always follow the GDL laws, even if other parents are breaking them. And I did. You still follow the law. That's not one of the times you want to be kind of, peer pressured into doing something. So if, you have a team driver, but somebody wants you to take their kids to school, if you're not comfortable with that or, bringing them home from soccer practice, speak up and just say, I would like, my child to have more time practicing, behind the wheel of a car before they start transporting anyone. And those are just, smart choices that a parent needs to make in order to assure safety for, their child and another person's child as well. Practice, practice, practice. Kids didn't learn to be, the best soccer player or football player just in a few months or a year. It takes years of practice. It takes, coaching, if you will, of learning how to drive. And if that's not you because you butt heads or because, you get super anxious, then, enroll your child in a driving school. There's, 3 or 4 here in Lexington that you can enroll your child into. And, they can, help with that, teaching kids how to drive. But practice all of that, the day, the night driving, the different weather conditions, roads. Talk to other parents again about expectations. Drowsy driving, your kid's been working late or up late studying or on medicine, or just had a rough night, offer to drive them to school. Don't allow them to drive drowsy. And then the last thing is advocate for the GDL laws at your team's school. Again, it's always heartbreaking when any loss of life occurs. And, when it happens to, a friend of your child or, people in your church or your neighborhood, all of those things are just really and truly, heartbreaking. And we want to do all that we can to reduce the risk of those things happening. But there is a podcast about, parents with kids that are at this stage in life where they're learning how to drive. So there's different podcasts, and on this website, all of these things that we kind of flip through because of the audio you can just kind of listen later on and hear those, really impactful, moving stories of parents who have lost a child due to a preventable injury. It's a rite of passage. It's an exciting time. It's something that kids look forward to, and we don't want to be, stealers of that joy, but we also want to make sure that we're not putting kids in harm's way. We're doing our due diligence and making sure that they're getting the supervision, the teaching, the practice that they need in order to be good drivers. Most car crashes are 100% preventable with just driving buckled up, non-distracted, following the rules of the road, following the graduated driver's licensing, and going through those, additional steps of hours and hours of supervised practice. So those are the things that we can do as parents and caregivers of teens approaching this particular, like I said, phase in life that is, puts them probably at the greatest risk that they will ever be in their entire lives, is behind the wheel of a car at this very young age. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and put my face on here. If you guys want to ask questions, I'm going to look at the chat here.
If you have questions, you're welcome to type them in the chat. If you choose to unmute and talk, just make sure you keep your camera off. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Okay, so a lot of people are approaching or kind of in the throes of teens that will be driving or are driving. So hopefully there were some things that gave you some pause and things to ponder about, maybe doing some additional supervision time. I'm not sure if there's any specialty driving training for kids with special health care needs. I can look into that. I know that Larry Roberts, who was our county attorney, used to have a driving school, and I know of somebody with ADHD that attended that, but I don't know if it was, I don't think that's anything that he advertises. We do have trainings for different teams at school. Sometimes we do some things through Zoom. Katie, if that's something that you're interested in with a group of teens, you can maybe reach out to me and let me know what school your teen is at, and we can offer some teen driver safety at that particular school. Sometimes, like I said, if we have a group, whether that's not necessarily an entire, student body that are drivers at a school, but just a group of teens, whether that's a particular club at school, a social club, a athletic club, anything like that. We're happy to do that. We have a couple really good programs. The Impact Teen Driver, which is the sister to what we just did today. And then there's a Kentucky Checkpoints program as well that we do. So several that we offer, and we're happy to have a conversation with you about, putting something together that would reach your child.
I'll make sure to include Sherry's contact information in the follow-up email as well.
Did you all find this useful? Maybe some things that you didn't necessarily think about was important, but it was like, oh, that does make a lot of sense.
I see some yes comments in the chat. You mentioned that there are several driving schools in Lexington. Do you happen to know the names of those schools?
I know that there's one Boone, I think, but you could probably just do a Google of Lexington driving schools. I guess where I do this, I pay attention when I see those particular, business of student driver on their vehicle. So, I mean, I think that there are several to choose from, and just look at the reviews to see, how satisfied parents are. Because I mean, it's not for the faint-hearted with parents. My kids always preferred to do their team driving with their dad as opposed to me because I would get more nervous if he was more laid back. So, if that's, and that's, kind of a stressful environment that you're adding to the situation, maybe having an instructor might be useful. Or if you're just having a child that just seems to, having a little bit trouble connecting the dots and their, hand to, mind, connecting, breaking too slowly or whatever. Sometimes there are instructors that are, that's their skills that they're much better at giving that driver education. And sadly, we don't have that in schools anymore. It used to be many, many years ago that driver's education was something that you could do in high school. And that I think has gone away um, a bit ago. So, but check out those driver school if that's something that you're interested in.
A couple of people, someone shared in the chat that there's Apex Driving School on Custer Drive, and then there's Central Kentucky Driving School on Locust Hill Drive.
Okay, Boone is on. Okay. I was trying to think when my kids were were younger.
Mhm.
Yeah. This is an important topic and something that certainly needs our time and attention to. So hopefully this will you know help you all when you're thinking about your team driver. When they go, where they go. Um, making sure that there's an agreement that you have between each other about their driving practices and who maybe they transport with them and who they get in the car with as well, because you don't want them to be an unsafe passenger.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sherry. This has been really helpful, really informative, and I'm sure a lot of parents will really benefit from this information. I'll be sure to share it with our entire network of parents as well. And it'll, of course, be saved on our website for future use as well. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody out there.